From the Ticats Audio Network, this is Tiger Cats Game Day with Courtney Stephen and Mike Daly.
Welcome to Tiger Cats Game Day on the Ticats Audio Network. I am Courtney Stephen, as always, joined by the Honorable Mike Daly. Mike, since our last talk, the Ticats are 1-0, so
Here we go.
It's a good feeling in Hamilton as the 1-4 Ticats travel west to take on the 3-1 BC Lions. Now, BC has been playing with some confidence, but the Ticats have a renewed sense of confidence this week.
Yeah, especially with that close win, right? Like when you look at the Ticats and most of their losses this year are on those last second plays, the breakdowns in the end of the fourth quarter. So it's nice, and it's nice to get a win like that. You know what I mean? To say, okay, you know what, we can actually pull ourselves out of these tough games when something, when adversity strikes, we're able to step up and be able to win some of these games. And, especially on this short week going out west, to have some of that confidence behind you, that's going to be huge for them, right? Because, if it swung the other way that last game, that's in a short week and, tough travel, that just piles on top of each other. So, they have to be feeling good getting out there.
Absolutely. And going from a Saturday game to a Thursday night contest, 10 p.m. Eastern, all the way out from the Pacific time zone, it's going to be an exciting matchup. All the excuses you could make about adversity, traveling time zones, playing the short week, guys who have gone down on the injured list. But you know what? One thing, this is actually the most consistency the Ticats have experienced from one game to the next this entire season. Diving into the lineups, I think you're going to see a lot of consistency across the last game and this one on that offensive line. Starting the same five, you've got Kelly, Revenberg, Fontana, Woodmansey, and Van Zyl starting to get a little bit of chemistry. They had a much better performance last game than, what the first few games of the season had been. And I think that is showing up for Dane Evans. He's, throwing the ball about as well as anybody, averaging just over 280 yards passing per game. The one change on the offense that we're seeing is in the slot back, Anthony Johnson out with 6 weeks on the 6-game injured list with a hand injury. He will be replaced by Emmanuel Butler, first-year player out of Northern Arkansas, I believe, Northern Arizona. So we'll see what he brings to the table. But the receiver core, we've got Stephen Dunbar Jr., who made an incredible catch last week.
Oh my gosh, it was almost unbelievable to watch that, wasn't it? Like it was like the OBJ. I'd say.
You know what? And then of course you've got Tim White, the leading receiver for the Ticats, and you got Turnowski and Braylon Addison rounding out that group. But I don't think there's any shortage of big plays, of heroics, of playmakers. It's really just been a matter of stringing it together and finding consistency. If that's what this team has been about, what do these guys, specifically the offense, have to do in this week? Who has to show up?
Yeah, I mean, just your guys have to show up. Like you said, there's enough playmakers out there that it doesn't need to be one person that shows up. If you can spread that ball around and everybody, get their 80, 90, 100 yards, somebody go off a little bit for 130, whatever it might be. Because Dane, you look at last game, Dane's throwing the ball well. Like you said, he is throwing the ball really well. It's going to be a broken record, though, and it's the turnovers, right? Last game, it was a little bit different of a look with the turnover. It was the fumble, and then it was the kickoff return fumble, and then the fumble on the sack, which was a tough one, right? But it was just however you got to do it, because it's all three phases, right? You got to get the ball on defense. You got to turn that thing over, but it's going to be a broken record until it's fixed. They were negative in the turnover battle last game, so they have to fix that. But they got enough playmakers that you see when their offense is clicking. It's awesome, man. They're putting up tons of yards. They're putting pressure on defenses. And, it's just, like I said, it's always going to be the turnovers.
Yeah, stacked up team. And then hopping over to the other side of the ball, A lot more of the same consistency. Kyle Wilson in for Simone Lawrence at that weak side linebacker spot, but a couple interesting second line reserve players stepping into the fold. You got Chris Malumba, who was really good in preseason playing on that defensive line. He counts as a global player, but he played his college ball at Colorado. So he will be very active as D linemen. They do rotate and they do play a ton of special teams. Interested to see what he brings to the game. And of course, Des Lawrence getting his first action of the year, the defensive back. He plays corner. He'll be listed behind Jamal Roll, but expect him to be on special teams as well, earning that paycheck. As a designated import, there are a small handful of Americans who are non-starters who get to contribute. Typically, a designated import is reserved for a kicker, a punt returner. But if you're not the kicker or the punt returner and you are a DI, that means that you've got to be an ace. You're probably playing all four special teams. And if any person goes down in your position group, you probably play multiple positions. Des Lawrence, you know this guy. What's his skill set and what's he bring to the game?
Well, don't forget, he ended up having to pick up weak side corner last season, right? Ended up winning Rookie of the Year for the Ticats. So he's a player, and he is a physical player. When he was on special teams, he was able to make a lot of plays. So expect that. But he's going to have to pick up for Nick Cross, who's actually out this game. And Nick Cross is one of those guys where I'm sure you've heard of his name, but not everybody is familiar with him, because, you generally just see special teams as a whole as a field position change. But what Nick Cross brought that you can't really see except looking on film is he messed up every single return. You look at this young kid and, he is an absolute ace on special teams. He is in the face of every returner, whether it's punt, whether it's on kickoff. So to see Des Lawrence probably step into that role and try to help, Butler and the rest of the special teams be able to cover and be able to contain that special teams unit of BC Lions. Expect him to get out there and make some plays and Des to show up on film.
Definitely. And I think the kicking game will be important in this one. The defense will be important in this one. We're expecting the offense to come out and do their thing, but this one will likely be decided by the defense and the special teams. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but let's talk about this Lions lineup. You've got a bunch of headliners. Nathan Rourke, probably the story of the year in the CFL, the Canadian kid out of University of Ohio from Oakville, which is not too far from Hamilton. So many of the people have heard about his story by now, but he is very much probably the most exciting player to watch in the CFL. I mean, he's passing for 338 yards a game, 80% completion percentage. He's got 3 touchdowns for every 1 interception he throws. And in his 4 games, he already has 12 touchdowns. The guy is making plays. He's not just out there, checking the ball down and throwing crossers. He is putting up bombs. He's got receivers all around him, and all of them are getting touches. What kind of player is Nathan Rourke?
Yeah, it's tough, man. When you watch him play, he's a tough guy to game plan for, because, we talk about the game plan for Trey Ford, right? Or game planning for a guy like Zach Collaros who's going to sit in the pocket, right? He's kind of got both of that, right? He can move, he can run. I think he's already got 180 yards rushing on the season, something like that. And really, he can hurt you both ways. And it's not like, he's better at one than the other and whatever it might be. He can throw that ball around the field. He's got some playmakers at that wide receiver spot, right? Especially Dominique Grimes, like we're going to talk about. But he's got a lot of players around him, and he's throwing the ball as well as anybody. And I think the interesting stat that I read that's going to be something to watch a little bit is Winnipeg held him for no rushing attempts. So that's the game they lost, and that's the game they looked kind of, real, like a regular team, right? Mm-hmm. So that'll be an interesting thing to pay attention to, but he is an absolute dual threat quarterback, and, he is exciting to watch. So the Ticats, they're going to have a handful with this guy.
Absolutely. And that BC Lions team is not the same BC Lions from a year or two ago. They've got a strong offensive line, and they've got playmakers all around. From the guys who are on the injured list, you would expect them to kind of slow down. Without Brian Burnham, who is one of the best receivers in recent CFL history, he hasn't even really played since this whole BC Lions team turned themselves around. You've got a guy like Lucky Whitehead who's playing partially injured, 0 touchdowns on the year, and you're asking yourself, where has all of this production come from? You've got guys like Dominique Rhymes who've stepped up in a humongous way, arguably one of the most productive, if not one of the most dangerous players in the CFL. He's got 5 receptions over 30 yards to lead the CFL. He's got 4 receiving touchdowns, and this is all just on 20 catches. So the ball is being spread around. You also have James Butler, the running back, 3 rushing touchdowns, 3 receiving touchdowns. And we're talking about in 4 games because BC, the only team to have 2 bye weeks in the first 6, they're doing some damage. They're well rested.
Yeah.
And they also have a few guys on the defense that are familiar, namely a guy by the name of Delvin Breaux, who is looking to match up against his old team, the team where he cut his teeth in the CFL, the Hamilton Tiger Cats. What are you seeing when you look at this BC Lions offense? And then overall, how do you feel like BC matches up against the Ticats?
Yeah, they're, like I said, their offense is working on all cylinders, right? Like even James Butler, the running back, he's a little scat back there, and he's making people miss left, right, and center. When you move over to their defensive side, their DBs are good. They are very good. I mean, across the board, you got, every year all-star in TJ Lee who's making plays, right? Marcus Sales, who flies around out there, probably the fastest guy you'll see on film. And then with that addition of Delvin Breaux, I mean, Courtney, you and I know him very well. I would say he changed the game of football, of the CFL football. He changed the pass interference rules. He made it that, you can only touch him before 5 yards. He would push people out of bounds. He's as big as a defensive end playing corner and able to run with everybody. So to have him out there, they trust him just to try to lock somebody down. So that'll be, good back end. The one thing where I have a feeling we might see the Ticats try to attack, and it was the exact same thing we talked about last week with the Will linebacker. But Bo Lacumbo is out for the BC Lions. And Bo Lacumbo, veteran player at this point, really makes a lot of plays. And they're starting a rookie, Ben Hladic. I hope I said that correctly.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, perfect. But they're starting a rookie out there at Will linebacker, and we talked about it with the hashes being a little bit closer. There being a little bit more range on the outside of that weak side field, right? And now a rookie coming in for a guy like Bo Lacumbo. That'll be interesting to see how that plays out, right? It's not easy position out there at Will, and just like we were talking with Kyle, who I thought did a really good job last game, this Ben Hladic guy, this rookie, is going to have a lot to deal with, especially with Tim White and Don Jackson, Steve Dunbar being, the majority of what he's going to see.
Absolutely. And now just talking about the field and how the hashes are a little bit more narrow, it's a little bit more balanced. BC has a strategy in play that not every team does or can use with their corners. They've got Peters on one side. They got Breaux, a.k.a. Mr. Two Straws, a.k.a. bring him to the bench and get him some Gatorade. They just stay on their side of the field, so they don't have to flip-flop every play like traditional field corner, boundary corner. Breaux stays on one side, Peter stays on the other, and they don't care who they match up against because those are both guys who've traditionally played that boundary corner position. What kind of advantage or matchup problems can they create with that alignment that they play?
Well, yeah, it's tough. I mean, I guess offensively they'll know where they'll always be, right? So I guess you can kind of avoid somebody if you need to. But let me actually flip this question back on you, because I think what ends up happening is, as a player, you want to either get used to somebody or you want to be able to change it up on someone. So as a DB, which we both were, when you're matching up against somebody, would you prefer to see the same guy all game long and be able to play that head game where, he thinks I'm going to do this, I know he's watched film on me? Or would you kind of like to keep moving around and get somebody new and, maybe they don't have as much info on you? How would you feel about it as a player with that?
You know what? As a defensive back, playing on one side, not having to flip-flop, it actually would make things easier, in my opinion, just off of the strength of the fact that the game comes to you and you can spend less time in transition. If an offense goes hurry up, during that time when the ball is being set, you're jogging from wherever the play finished to wherever you have to get lined up for that next play. It's alignment, assignment, it's call, execution, and you're trying to do the math of, okay, who am I looking at? What do I have to do? Where do I need to get lined up? Now, if you're already close to where you're going to be lined up and you can get the call early, that might give you an extra 2 seconds to just digest, process, and think about what you can see in front of you and how you're going to react to the different options the offense will give you. So for a veteran guy like either of these corners we're talking about with Peters and Bro, I think staying on your side gives you that extra half second to just process the offense. Yeah, you're going to see more faces because they're going to be rotating receivers through, but these are guys that watch a ton of film, and especially going up against receivers who aren't first-year receivers, they've been watching film on them from seasons previous. So I think there will be an advantage to the defense because they are staying home. But, hey, remains to be seen if that materializes in an impact in the game, actually.
Absolutely. And the other thing, too, is, generally a weak side corner doesn't see a lot of receivers on their side. So now when you're only staying left and right, you get a little more experience as that season plays out. So I think, if we look at this on a long-term basis, I think once you get into the season, it's going to help them out a lot because, Delvin and Peters on both sides are going to be able to see a lot more throughout that season and be, a little more accustomed to being out formationed or having somebody show up with 4 receivers. They'll be used to doing that. So yeah. I think it'll definitely pan out well.
It's definitely gonna force guys like Bro to think a little bit more because we call him 2 straws, or we call him, have a nice day, where it's really just Bro on the island, press coverage, and you can just eliminate a guy. But if the defensive scheme calls for you to drop back in the zone to the field side, then you know what? He may have to expand his game away from just being that shutdown press corner and become a full-fledged cover and tackle corner. Not to say that Delvin Bro can't do it, but hey, he's got a very particular skill set. He's like the Liam Neeson of DBs. So it'll be interesting to see how that one goes. But, talking about the teams and how they're doing and the strategies they've been using, let's look a little bit at the trends going into this one. BC, goodness gracious, first in the league in points for with 39.8 per game. Almost 40 points per game they're averaging in 4 games. Net offense, first in the CFL, 466 yards a game. Opponent net offense, also first in the CFL, holding teams to 288 per game. And BC is averaging twice as many rushing yards as the Hamilton Tiger Cats, with 129 per game to the Hamilton Tiger Cats 64. I think the rushing yards is more of a factor related to the fact that BC has been up in games, and generally the team that's winning is trying to run out the clock. But those things go hand in hand. Winning, running the ball, scoring points. It's all different stats that point to the fact that BC has been getting in the end zone and they have been keeping other people from moving the ball. So what are the keys for Hamilton going into this one? Obviously, stop the ball and stop Rourke. But how do they do that when he's spreading the ball around to so many different people and he's really not turning it over that much?
Yeah, I think what you end up having to do is, just kind of be who they've been the past 2 games, especially the defense. Early on in the season, they were giving up 350 plus yards per game, right? The past 2 games, they've given up just over 250. So they've drastically increased in terms of their production on defense. When you look at trying to game plan for this team, I really think that, especially with the short week, it's not like you can put a lot in specific game plan wise, because when you look at a week as a player, as a coach, you generally have 3 practice days and a walkthrough day. So generally first day of practice is let's work on first down, 1st and 10. Second day of practice is a little bit of 1st and 10, second and medium, right? And then the last day of practice is second and long. And you get your game plans each of those days for those type of situations. When you have a short week like this, all you're really looking to do is to up your execution of your previous game plans or your previous plays. You'll have a little bit of stuff that you can put in, but not a ton, because you just don't have the amount of time, you don't have the amount of reps to be able to really get experience for your players. So they'll have a little bit, but what I'm looking for is just them to up their execution, which, I mean, Corey, you've been in different systems, right? You've been in a system where it's a lot of change of game plans, it's a lot of different coverages each and every week, or it's, hey, we're going to be good at this, and this is what we're going to run, and we're going to know our stuff, and we're going to get in position and make them beat us. And I think that's what you're going to try to see with the Ticats on this short week. So I'm not looking for them to do anything crazy to try to stop BC. I'm just looking for their execution to up from the last couple of games, and then hopefully that'll play out and they can, kind of confuse Rourke a little bit once they're a little more comfortable. Now, would you agree with that, maybe it's a little easier as a player to just have a simpler game plan or a less of a game plan? Or do you like the switching every single game and something new?
No, you know what? You got to have your bread and butter. And I think it's a time in the season where the staples that you run are going to be the staples that you run. To your point, you're going to put a wrinkle in here or there. You may have one play that you've been practicing for 3 weeks that you just haven't put on film yet. And coaches who are experienced in this league will be preparing for those types of things. They've seen the schedule in advance, so this short week is not a surprise to them. They're veterans too, and coaches get paid to have those kinds of strategies up their sleeve. But there's going to be a core set of plays that the players are comfortable running and that they do well, and that's what they're going to go to. Of course, the script in the beginning of the game, we like to say, they're going to come out, they're going to try you with this, they're going to do something to take advantage of something they saw in film. But ultimately, it's less about what the opponent is going to do to you, and it's more about how you can dictate the tempo of the game, enforce your will, and use your weapons to their full advantage. I expect to see the same Ticats team that we've seen in the fact of they're not going to come out here and just be all of a sudden a power running team. They're going to spread you out, they're going to do some misdirection, and they're going to put the ball up in the air. Now, the proficiency with which they throw the ball is going to dictate a lot, because if they're going 2 and out and they're keeping their defense on the field for a long time, I'll tell you right now, it's going to be lights out in the first half. They're going to have to establish drives, and the defense is going to have to keep them in the game all 4 quarters. They can't let this one run away. And I think in order to play a 4-quarter game, Coach Steinauer knows that whoever makes it to game day healthiest has the best chance. So to your point, they probably didn't spend a ton of time putting in extra reps and spending more time on the field than they needed to. It was super hot in Ontario this last week. I bet there was a little bit more of a walk-through tempo, or maybe there was a little bit more heavy on the film study. Make sure you rest, recover, get your body back to where it needs to be, but get your mind right. Go back and revisit the things you did wrong so that we can clean them up. And we're not going to overload your brain with a ton of new things. We want you to play fast as coaches. That's my message if I'm the coach heading into this game. One of the trends that I think the Ticats know, and probably everybody who's watched a Ticat game this season would agree, is they've got to buck this trend of turning the ball over. And it's been every single kind of turnover you could imagine, whether it was, on special teams, if it was a receiver, if it was a ball, any kind of ball carrier, if it was a quarterback. It's not that there's just one person who's been dropping the ball. It's just in general turning over the ball, and untimely turnovers that lead to points at that. That's a trend that I think needs to be reversed. Hamilton right now last in the CFL in turnover ratio, -11. But BC, they're a middle of the pack team. They're -1, which is only as good enough for 4th. So What are the ways that Hamilton can crack this game open and really make it theirs? If the defense forces some turnovers, does that give them a chance to get this upset, or is it going to take more than just a couple of turnovers for the Ticats?
I mean, I think you got to look at, first things first, and you're exactly right with that turnover margin. That is one of the biggest indicators on who wins the game. If you hear about the don't shoot yourself in the foot, there's two ways to shoot yourself in the foot. Penalties, number one, and turnovers, number two, right? And when you look at those two stats, turnovers and penalties are the biggest way for you to lose games. And the way the Ticats have been losing games this season are close. So when you're looking at these razor-thin margins to win a game, the turnovers and the penalties, and the Ticats are doing great in penalties. Same with BC. So they're not going to shoot themselves in the foot that way. But it's exactly like you said. First things first, limit those turnovers. And listen, they're going to happen. When you're playing football, that's going to happen. But there's going to be a huge emphasis on protecting that ball. And then number two, I think, one of my trends, and that kind of goes along with this, is those second down conversions. Right? I think this is another huge thing, and this is where you can get your turnovers, is on those second downs when people are really trying to, reel to keep the chains moving. And BC's been the best in the league at the second down conversions. That's what's getting those points. That's why you see BC leading the league in these passing yards and touchdowns and stuff like that, because they're able to keep these drives going. So look for being able to definitely limit those turnovers on offense and get some turnovers on defense, but that will come on those second downs, is being able to get them off the field. If we can pick the ball off a couple of times, when we get a sack, fumble, whatever it might be, special teams punch one out of there, I think that's really what's going to dictate this game, being able to slow them down.
Now, this one is coming out of left field for you, but what does Mark Washington do differently that Nathan Rourke hasn't seen yet? Or what does he do that gave Nathan Rourke trouble? Is it, just putting guys on guys and letting the best player win? Or is it going to be the coach creating a scheme that Nathan hasn't seen yet, that he has to digest, that's going to confuse him? Maybe it's pressure. What do you think the Ticats do? What do you think the game plan they implement would look like to try and get them to win some of those second downs from a defensive perspective?
Yeah, I think number one is definitely limit the rushing yards on first down, right? Like, if they're going to be able to get 5 yards a pop on first down, then that just puts you in a tough situation like we've talked about before, right? That 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4 range is a tough one to be in on defense. But with this short week, like we were talking about, I don't know how much he can really put in to change for Rourke, right? I think what you're going to look at, and the CFL is a copycat league. That being said, is Mark Washington and staff are going to look at, okay, BC's been winning a lot of games, but they lost pretty big to Winnipeg. What did Winnipeg do to limit BC's offense? And when you look at it, no rushing attempts from Rourke. So maybe that's one thing. Hey, we have to be hyper aware of this. Maybe the rush lanes, maybe not as many stunts from the D lineman to give him an escape route, right? Maybe have a little spy on him on 2nd and long. Make sure that he can't get out of the pocket and get some scramble plays going. Maybe that's something that, is a pretty easy game plan adjustment to just put in, and everybody kind of understands what's going on. That's more so him play calls. But when you look at the overall scheme of stuff, I don't think you can really add a lot in this short amount of time. So I think they're going to take a little bit of what Winnipeg did, and just like I said, execution on what they have been doing, especially the past 2 games where they've been playing a lot better, and just catch one of those picks. Get something in your hands and squeeze it. That's it. That's all you got to do.
Squeeze the pill. Squeeze the pill. Don't fight the ball. And talking about guys, let's talk about these matchups, coming to the end of this one. A lot of stars are going to be shining. It's going to be a late night game. They're playing indoors. There's no excuses about the weather. We're going to have Nathan Rourke, Dane Evans, Delvin Breaux, Jamal Roll, all these different guys. Who are the matchups that you're paying attention to, that the fans should pay attention to?
So number one, I definitely want to see James Butler versus Kyle Wilson and Jovan Santos Knox. I think James Butler for Rourke has been that safety net. He's very quick to get into his check down, right? So he'll look downfield to try to hit some of those big passing plays. But if it's not there, he is very quick to get that thing out to James Butler. James Butler is a very good running back in open field. He can make a lot of people miss, and he's been doing it all season. So I think when you look at, especially how Mark Washington plays his defense, is it's a lot of keep everything in front of you and then come downhill and make those tackles. So I want to see Jovan Santos Knox and Kyle Wilson making their open field tackles against James Butler because, like, Corey, you and I have heard every single time, any tackle in the open field is a good tackle.
Any tackle. And I'll tell you this, in the CFL, they got some of the shiftiest guys. And it's tough when you're coming from 10, 15 yards deep to make that tackle. You got to know where your help is. And sometimes you just got to wait until the cavalry gets there before you shoot. I like those situations, though, because that's where the highlights are made on either end. Either it could be a very impressive tackle or it can be a trip to the trainer to go get that spat redone and get those ankles tightened up. Speaking of getting tightened up, Delvin Breaux, I'm interested to see him and how motivated he is going up against his former team, known for locking down receivers. And he's going to see Stephen Dunbar Jr., who's been one of the big playmakers for the Ticats. Also, he'll get a chance to go up against Ternowski, but specifically Stephen Dunbar Jr., who's been a spark. He's one of the guys who plays with energy for the Ticats. He can make the big play. We talked about his sensational grab, but that's two big body guys who are capable of changing the game. I want to see what that matchup looks like. And, maybe when they get in some situations where the Ticats are just across midfield and they're within striking distance, the deep ball specifically, I want to see how that matchup goes when the ball's thrown 25 plus yards down the field and they've got to play it in the air. That's what these guys get paid for. Those are the most exciting ones. I will be looking at that. Talk to me about the man of the hour, though. I mean, anybody watching this is going to be looking to see what Nathan Rourke does next. Who are you looking at in terms of his matchup?
Yeah, for me, it's and first of all, I do want to touch on the Delvin Breaux matchup because I think that's a really good one to take a peek at. Because when you look at the Ticats, the target amount to Stephen Dunbar and Tim White over on that weak side, I'm wondering now, as I'm thinking in my head, maybe BC Lions bye week and game plan is, hey, maybe we should move Delvin over to Stephen Dunbar and try to just at least eliminate that matchup. So I'll be interested to see if that happens, right? Because if you're going to look at the Ticats and say who's getting a lot of the passes, it's Stephen Dunbar, Tim White. They're killing teams. So maybe you see Delvin Breaux move on over there. But for the Rourke situation, I'm ready to see this matchup between Dane and Rourke. I think, they're both playing well, like we talked about with the turnovers. Dane's got to clean that up a little bit. It's not all on him. Some is, not all of it. But when it's not turned over, Dane is playing lights out. He kept the Ticats in that last game, and he has been putting yards up. He's been using his receivers very well. Rourke is obviously playing, as we all know Nathan Rourke to be playing this season, and he's playing at the top of the league. I'm very, very excited to see this matchup. And, I mean, hey, as a viewer, what do you want more of? Two quarterbacks that are going to sling the ball around out there, put some yards up, put some touchdowns up there, make some people miss in the open field, make some scramble plays. I think this is going to be a fun matchup to watch between those two.
Definitely guys who can make it happen with the ball in the air, in the pocket, on the move, everything that you could ask for. This one, you're going to have to drink a couple coffees to catch the full game. It's happening on the West Coast tonight in Vancouver. The BC Lions 3-1 taking on the Hamilton Tiger Cats 1-4 in search of that second win in a row. You can hear this on the Ticats audio network. Of course, RJ and Luke, as always, have got the call, and the pregame show happening extra late, right around bedtime. You've got Andy and Bubba getting you ready for this one. So we appreciate you again tuning in For Mike Daly, this is Courtney Stephen. This has been another episode of Tiger Cats Game Day, and we will catch you next week.
It's game day and you're ready. So are we. Let us know your thoughts. Email us at gameday@ticats.ca. Courtney Stephen and Mike Daly are here every game day with their insights into today's game. Subscribe to the Ticats Audio Network on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.